Now, the title of our talk for this morning is How to Tune Into Mental States of the Masters. You recall last week we took up the matter of the ability to change habit patterns and just what habit patterns related to. We tried to show you what the principle was behind habit patterns and to also help you to see that habit patterns are not bad. It just depends on what habit pattern we happen to have. We tried to show you that you couldn't walk if you hadn't developed a certain habit pattern from experience, trial, effort, and failure, so that you learned how to balance your body with your brain, with your direction.
This was a habit pattern. We showed you how the ability to be a musician
Depends on developing habit patterns in terms of being able to hit
the notes the moment the eye sees the note.
a sort of simultaneous pattern that
Becoming a good typist.
involves the same principle. We pointed out to you that if you hadn't
Developed habit patterns, say, in relation to driving a car, we'd have an even worse mess
than we have, and if you don't think it's possible, you'd be mistaken.
Bad as the situation is, driving, especially in Los Angeles, without habit patterns, we would really be in trouble. Because the more we can develop proper habit patterns, the more our attention is freed to handle and direct
ourselves in terms of these habit patterns in more creative ways.
So
We were
analyzing the essence that's involved in habit patterns and showing how various habit patterns formed in earliest states of our evolution as a race and as individuals. The need to survive, for example, making it necessary for us to develop the habit pattern of being suspicious of everybody. Otherwise, how were we going to develop our intellect, our awareness, our sharpness, with all the dangerous things that existed? And remember, it is in facing
problems that we sharpen our mind, our wits, and therefore develop the mentality as a whole.
And as we form or develop the habit patterns in relation to certain parts of survival or accomplishment, whether it be creative or whether it be something that seems other than creative, it still remains a fact at all times that the habit pattern is there to serve evolution. The habit pattern is there to serve life. To the degree that attention from the higher source that pushes evolution was able to bring about a habit pattern, a firmly induced habit pattern, to that degree then was it possible for the various organic functions to become more complex, so that it is from previous attention. Keep this in mind, because then we'll go on to our next point. It is from this previous attention that was given by a source of consciousness within us, as well as that source being, of course, in connection with the universal source. It was through this that we more and more developed an ability to keep a sort of inviolate unity of awareness within a complexity of expression. And so now we don't have to think about beating a heart or digesting food. Step by step, that in us which is at one with Mother Nature, that's Tarot Key 17, if you recall, developed an ability through meditation, because meditation is, keep in mind, an extension of concentration, that is attention. Step by step then, we learned to hold certain images which made deep enough grooves in our awareness, and this in an area that is not physical or material, basically, more in what one might call the etheric astral level of consciousness. And this in turn then was able to project and keep these, shall we say, tests and successful experiments going, so that now we have a vehicle that is quite a miracle, and we learn when we're born how to perform other functions, because we don't have to worry about all the miraculous things that go on inside of our skins to keep the organism alive, sensitive, responsive to the vibrations that come from all directions. and therefore to make interpretations of these vibrations in terms of our own images. Now, here is where we pointed out to you that tarot becomes so important, because in the habit patterns that we have formed, which by now we should have outgrown, and which, on the whole, we have not outgrown as thoroughly as we would wish to, some of them not at all, of course, we find ourselves in the position, at this stage of our evolution, of being in an extraordinary type of conflict. The habit pattern, which was more or less required for one stage of our evolution, has become outgrown in a sense, because in a society where we have, for example, well set up legal elements and police, it's not necessary that we go about as suspiciously as we did before. We have the police to be suspicious for us, perhaps, and those who make the laws. How well they do it is beside the fact. I think they do an extraordinary job when we realize how much barbarism and wildness still exists in the human breast. But on the other hand, it's also quite extraordinary that we have been able to learn how to check certain expressions of this wildness because of the rules of society, which are also a part of the patterns that we have. So our parents and society, the moment we are born, they start giving us certain patterns for us to develop, habit patterns, which we have to be able to function properly in a social unit. And our evolutionary level usually determines how well we accept these patterns and in what way we accept them. And of course, in that area is where so many of the problems exist. That is, our misinterpretation of experience, our need to rebel, which incidentally is always good, as long as we learn how to rebel constructively rather than destructively. In other words, we do not lose any of these energies that we had, even the wild ones. What we do is learn to use them for constructive purposes. Now, how is it that we do this? Here's where we come to the mental states of the masters and the use of tarot in our growth. Now, there are some people who keep searching for ever new methods, ever new techniques that are going to give them the proper way or method, the secret teaching that's going to give them the whole thing. So then, prestidigitation, cosmic consciousness, or greater power. And people such as these walk through life unhappy, frustrated. Because why? They continue to think that there's some magic formula outside, maybe one or a group of magic formulas, that receiving these magic formulas, they're going to be able to do the same thing that Aladdin did with his lamp. You know, you rub the lamp and you have the genie, and what can't you do? And they seem to think, types such as these, and unfortunately there are too many of them, they seem to think that when they don't receive this magic formula in one school of thought, it's just that either the people haven't got it, you know, or they are self-deceived and think they have something which they don't, and they become disappointed and they go on to the next. Now, of this type of person, then, some become what Dr. Case used to call metaphysical tramps. They tramp around from one place to another, from one metaphysical lecture to another, from a spiritualistic to a new thought, to a science of mind, to a Christian Science, to a BOTA, to an AMORC. I mean, they go the rounds, always searching for the magic formula somewhere out there. And of course, although it is interesting and good to be familiar with all schools of thought, as you know, BOTA is heartily in favor of a well-developed mentality, otherwise you couldn't even remotely handle the work we have to give, inasmuch as we certainly consider ourselves, and not without reason, the highest level of occult training that exists on this planet at this time, and this is bar none. However, what we have to ask ourselves is, what do we mean by occult training? Is it that by coming and sitting and listening, we're suddenly going to be given that magic something? we, yes and no, because as a matter of fact, having ears ye hear not, and having eyes ye see not, as was quoted from the Bible. People are given the secret over and over again, and they don't realize it. They reject it. Their habit patterns are such that they are unable to receive the impact or realization of what this implies. And the real essence of it is they are not ready, nor are they willing to go to work. It's like being determined to become a doctor without going to college or pre-medical school, medical training, internship, etc. And even then they still kill you more often than cure you in some areas, as we know, with all this mad need for the testing of the latest drugs continuously on human beings, and yet some of them are saintly and do fine work, so that nothing is all one thing or another. We're not talking down the medical profession. We're just trying to show that any occultist who thinks he's going to get the secret formula that's going to just make him snap his fingers or rub Aladdin's lamp is basically being an escapist and unwilling to face his own darkness of heart and soul. In other words, he has not got real humility. He has not got real perception. He's not got real aspiration yet. He will, he or she, but not yet. Because just as a concert pianist can certainly not give any concert or even do anything but injure your ears and make the heart most heavy at the kind of noises that this person might attempt without any proper practice on the piano or the violin or whatever musical instrument it be, the practicing aspect of it. In the same manner, the occult aspirant can tramp around all he likes. He can read books galore. All of this is fine. We consider it excellent background. Because very often we have to discover, and not very often, usually, we have to discover what way doesn't work, and finally come to a point where we become desperate enough with ourselves to be willing to knuckle down and study and meditate and concentrate and yearn and stick and make a goal and stick with it. So that here we come then to a point where we have to discover that this rushing around for the magical formula isn't going to be found in that manner, because until we achieve a level of awareness where we realize we are receiving the magical formula, we're not going to be able to do anything with it, in any case, having ears. Therefore, learning how to hear what's being said, learning how to see what's really there, is really the essence of learning how to tune in to the mental states of the masters. And again, it is done through the disciplines of the tarot. The entire BOTA curriculum is involved in this, as well as the Tree of Life, which after all is an aspect. It is the main glyph or symbol presented to consciousness. It is the pictorial image presented to consciousness as a meditational symbol in order to help the whole awareness to grow from step to step, to take the paths of return, as it has been called, from the so-called bottommost sephira or emanation of God back to the higher levels of our own awareness of our selfhood, having gained whatever it is we are supposed to have gained in terms of individualizing ourselves, developing higher states of consciousness in various ways, and definite states of control. So there are some who may feel, I have read this book before, and throw it away. I have heard some, for instance, criticize Paul Brunton's books, and although he presents our Eastern brethren mainly And we feel that any human being in a Western culture is in a Western culture because it is the Western occult methods that he requires, except with rare exceptions. But I have heard people criticize some of Paul Brunton's books because they say he's too repetitive. Now, I've read them all. It's a long time since I read them, and that's a good thing because I still have my reactions to the earlier periods of my cosmic awarenesses and experiences. And therefore I'm able to keep in my mind the memory of what I thought then. And at that time I was struggling far more, even than now, if that's possible, with the habit patterns that one has in one's being, all of us as brothers and sisters of life. And I recall that I felt that these repetitions were not repetitive at all. They were the one and only way that it is possible to receive an image strongly enough, an idea deeply enough so it's going to take hold. And so I never felt this way. And then I noticed that those who complained about this were the ones who were always looking for the magic lamp. They were hunting for it out there. And until they stopped hunting for it that way, but decided what was their method, at least at this moment, what appealed to them, and just at least test that method before going on to the next, and completely, I mean. What could be accomplished? Nothing. So I always used to like to recommend these books to those who wanted an understanding of the Eastern representation, or at least one particular branch of the Eastern representation of occultism, because in the East there are as many branches of mysticism and occultism as you might say we have religions in the West. And that's saying an awful lot when you realize how many religions and various offshoots from religions exist around here. Now, the reason I mention this to you is because, as we know, as I pointed out last Sunday morning, a habit pattern is something that we receive from constant repetition. And we need these habit patterns now to prepare our consciousness for an ability to receive states of awareness and to develop states of control. We need to form habit patterns that are different from those we have had, that is, to destroy or to dissipate or to burn out or to melt out those patterns within ourselves which we have outgrown as evolving souls, and to use the same energy to replace these patterns in our consciousness with the type of pattern that will make us responsive to the ideas, the thoughts, the actions, and the reactions which will open us up to the higher levels. Now, I recall the first time that I actually looked into, and I hadn't been doing it much. It was a very beginning area for me then, when I'd been with Dr. Case a very short time. That is the Western portion of it. I had been immersed in the Eastern thought up till then. And I recall how, in looking at that tree of life, and there's a tree of life there at the place where he was and where I now stay, when you sit on the couch, there it is. It's always there. In other words, the tree and I have lived together every single waking moment of my life when I've been at home. It's there. The eye is always on it. It's something in me has always been absorbing it, as it was with Dr. Case. And then there are tarot keys strewn around all over the lot as I feel like having them. All over the house. I'll take out, maybe tarot key 14 to sort of inspire me in relation to something as a reminder in the kitchen, and I might have another one in the living room and another one in the bathroom. And I don't think it's sacrilege to have a tarot key in the bathroom or any other picture. I think that it is very inspiring to have our symbols in all places. So I had this tree of life before me, and I was just becoming familiar with it, and there were these tarot keys situated on the paths, and I was trying to get some concept or understanding in relation to this idea here of the Kabbalah apparently was saying that the tree of life represents 10 divine emanations, and we also were being given the idea of the 10 divine names, and I'd also been overrun with astrological terms. At that time, Dr. Case was giving a class at the Temple of Astrology. He rented their place. He's the only one they ever rented to, because he's the only one they ever thought enough of at the Temple of Astrology down on Burlington. So he gave his classes there for years, renting from them once a week, Thursday evenings. Well, I was just full of all these terms, listening to all these astrologers and all this talk about the different signs, and I got into a sort of state of confusion because I had accustomed myself. In other words, I had managed to form a habit pattern for myself up to that point, where I had been training myself to think of everything as an aspect of the universal one in terms of the Eastern thought. Now, naturally, the Western thought also has it. The Kabbalah, really, and the Hebrew tradition happens to be the first that presented to this planet the monotheistic idea of the one God, the one life, with the graded hierarchy of consciousnesses in it. And the masters, of course, represent the next state that we are aiming towards, the masters of wisdom. And therefore, the whole hierarchy, though we think of a master of wisdom or many masters of wisdom, or even levels of consciousness beyond that, we're not thinking of anything separate from the monotheistic one. That is, one and one alone is he, or it rather, because in Kabbalah it really isn't so much he. At any rate, I was thinking about these things, and I had put myself into a sort of regular process of looking and meditating on these tarot keys and the ideas involved in these differences, which didn't seem to me to be able to correlate with the unity. And then I took a nap one day, and then just as I was awakening, between the waking and sleeping state, when one is often most receptive, came this complete impact through the tree of life. In fact, I became the tree of life that time in my experience, and I didn't know that that was supposed to happen, but it did. And I saw the tarot keys, and I saw all these relationships, just like the relationship existing within us of the circulation of our blood feeding our different organs and our nervous system. Something happens on the finger, or you touch something, and now it's the nerve endings at the end of the finger that take up these sensations. Yet this goes all through, up the arm and through all sorts of other areas and through the parts of the spine to get to the brain, because unless it got to the brain, and then therefore to the consciousness which owns this brain, that is our higher self, our true beingness, which interprets this group of sensations for whatever it is, we wouldn't be able to have an image of the experience. Therefore, the interrelationship that exists to give experiences on the different levels, I saw this in my, shall we say, mystical awareness. But what I saw was even more, because I also heard, and that was the first time I really heard chanting. In fact, that's how I learned to really chant, in case you want to know, was from listening to it from the masters, because it was the Master R, and through him I was aware of the others, and yet into the beyond that I heard, and it was chanted. It wasn't really said. And it was chanted in its Hebrew original, and I didn't even know what that meant, and yet my consciousness knew it, immediately translated it, because inside of me my soul knew, although my conscious mind didn't. And I heard, shall I chant to you exactly as I heard it? Perhaps you've been taking the Thursday night classes, and we're doing the chanting. I'll let you hear how it sounded. Shema Yisrael Adonai then there was another finish. That's how I was taught to chant by the boss. Now, with that, I heard in my consciousness the translation, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And with it, what did I see? I saw a tarot key growing into a large image. In other words, it was being given to me through a tarot key that I'd been looking at and through the tree of life that I'd been looking at. I had been working on a symbolic image that is a focal point of concentration and meditation for those who've gone ahead. And because I had reached a point of this willingness to reiterate, it had opened me up to an ability to reach that level that is projecting and sending all the time in and through the universal symbols of consciousness. And that's the only way it can be sent. How is it going to be sent? Through words, which people react to in so many different ways. You tell one person you have emotions and they're insulted. You tell another person you have emotions and they're pleased. Right? I mean, are you going to use words? You tell one person he's a mystic and he's insulted. You tell another one he's a mystic and he's pleased. Are you going to use words for teachings? How can you? Our language is full of conditionings, habit patterns. And if you're going to evolve into a higher awareness and use the power, you have to bypass that. And from bypassing it, it transmutes itself from that higher awareness. This is the reason for tarot keys. Why do you think the masters gave it out to the world? It isn't just, I've spoken to you about using the tarot keys. For what? For helping you to have something to hang on to as a continuous drop, a reiteration, to change the habit patterns that keep you full of fear, keep you full of insecurity, keep you full of jealousy, hatred, which are part of fear and insecurity, by the way. But I like to give you the various translations from it, or so that you will see the significance of the way the traits stretch themselves around into other areas of expression. And so when we recognize the fact that we have such habit patterns of response in these fears, insecurities, hatreds, or sometimes hiding them through superiorities and authoritarianisms and power complexes. You know, power complexes really are indications of the most infantile level, in case you'd like to know, because only an infant has complete power. You know, it screams and mama runs. And power complexes always indicate the most infantile level of awareness. A person with an inferiority complex is more evolved than a person with a power complex, believe it or not. Think about it a minute and you'll see how that would run. Well, anyway, there are these habit patterns inside of us. And just understanding them is not enough. We are not able to face our own hearts because it's important to us to look good to others. And therefore, it's important to us to look good to ourselves. So we tell ourselves these fairy stories all over the place in connection with our own habit patterns. And then we do not seem to realize why it is that we keep inviting failure. If we wake up in the morning unhappy, if we go to bed at night unhappy, if we walk through a day bored, these are habit patterns that are causing this. And how are we going to get rid of them? Not by running from place to place for the magic lantern to rub and to be able to say to the genie, "Aha, now I've got you in my power. Bang, get rid of it. Give me the angel." You don't get them, you have to go to them. And you go to them only by transmuting your own patterns and doing it in such a way that you are not going to get caught in the same traps. So the 22 major tarot keys are the 22 pictorial symbolic statements of principles of consciousness. And the 10 Sephirith, or 10 divine emanations of God, which is on a tree of life. Those of you who've never seen it, it's in back there on the wall. Those 10 are the expressions, or the outer manifestations, of these inner principles, and even these take place on what? 4 planes. From the abstract, which is called the archetypal, down through the creational, which is the next one, down through the formative, which is similar to the astral, that part of the subconscious, and down into manifestation, which is called a Asiya in Kabbalah. Now, so you have those elements that are involved. The masters of the entire Western tradition, down through thousands of years, have been using this tree of life symbolism in and through which to project their knowing of reality, their knowing of what is real, what is not real, their ability to differentiate between illusion and delusion, their ability to know the difference between personality and soul, their ability to know the difference between higher self and personality and soul, their ability to know the difference between that which is eternal and that which is ephemeral. I mean, these are things that are known from experience. These are things that are known because the consciousness has reached a point where it is able to see and able to hear, because it has been willing to let go of all the other things that it knows, until people were able to let go of the fact that the earth is flat, or at least some of them. How were they going to be able to find out then that it's round? You have to let go to be able to experiment, to search, and to work. So the real way to learn how to tune yourself to the states of the masters is to be willing to go step by step, to work, to reiterate, to look at your tarot symbols, to study the idea of what there is involved in the tarot, to go on from that to the work with the tree that's all given in the lessons, and to correlate these so that your consciousness will always have a positive image, not only to replace the negative and to help dissipate your negative image habit patterns, but also to be receiving the influx of the help, inasmuch as these are the symbol form meditations that have gathered the force and the energies. And when we get up there, and getting up there doesn't mean we leave here, it's a different way of reacting, because we have filled our consciousness with a new idea. For instance, if we fill our consciousness, take a look, this is one example. There is tarot key number 1, the magician. Now this is symbolizing the state of attention. It's one of the principles of consciousness. The state of attention means keeping yourself focused in order to receive all your impressions intensively, fully, completely. Concentration, in other words. So look at the symbolic pictorial imagery that's involved here. With the right hand showing the strong hand, the positive hand, the magician is holding up the magic wand. This is the magic wand you want, not the one that you think you're going to get somewhere giving you the formula that's going to make all the spirits come and bow down to you and do your bidding. So here we have this magic wand, the real magic wand, that's doing what? With arm upraised, it is saying symbolically to your subconsciousness, whether your conscious mind knows it or not. But when your conscious mind knows it, it's that much more potent. We're adding force upon force. It is saying, my ability to concentrate, my ability to be able to express this miracle of an act of attention, which is an act of consciousness in attention, is because I am a channel from the above. That is, that which is above and beyond me is that which is the consciousness coming in and through me. And the figure 8 over the head is saying the same thing, also indicating. And over this mind, or this consciousness, is this, the figure 8 is a figure for infinity, you know, showing this is the eternal part of you. This is the part of you that is infinite. And yet it is this infinite part of you, it is this eternal part of you, which is concentrating you, the magician, concentration, active attention, in and through the ability to focus down, and then notice the other hand is pointing downwards. Again, what is that? The pointing is an act of attention, and it is pointing downwards to a garden, and the garden is what? Subconsciousness. And what is flowering? Desire and knowledge. Emotion, wisdom. You can interchange them in many ways. From the act of attention, so that which you pay attention to is that which becomes your knowledge and wisdom. This is what it is saying, and you know this is true. You pay attention to what a Republican has to say, and you become a Republican. You pay attention to what a Democrat has to say, and you become a Democrat. You pay attention to what a Southerner has to say, if he's from the white race, and you become a white race Southerner. And you pay attention to what the opposite side has to say, and you become the opposite. Whatever you pay attention to, just letting come in, this is what you become. And the tarot keys are aimed for a continuous practice to help you unbecome all the things that are not in accordance with reality, and most of the things we have formed as far as what we think is the right or good or proper. Most of them are not in terms of reality. But we have to be willing to let reality come in, and we do it through meditating on the tarot keys. The more these images then make an impact upon us, the more we become open to the highest kind of knowing, as we're willing to let go of the nonsense knowing, that which has come from the illusion and delusion of our past. And tuning into the consciousness of the masters has to do basically with learning how to hold the images in and through which they express and manifest, and also incidentally to be in contact with their channels. It's all osmosis, my darlings. This you should keep in mind. All of growth, all of evolution is actually a process of osmosis. And those of you who don't understand exactly what we mean by osmosis, it means a matter of absorption. We absorb into us, either from the negative and the hate, or from the positive and the love, from the nonsense and the psychic realms, or the true knowledge and complete knowing, or the psychic realms are a mixture of nonsense. Some of it is correct and some not, and how are you going to differentiate? Or from the true knowing of that vision from the peak and beingness. So this is you, and your ability to be truly in tune with the Master and receive, therefore, their state of consciousness is dependent on your placing yourself in that position, like the magician, really. That is, in that situation, or that position, or that concentration, and to continue to do it, so that you can be prepared to be open to that kind of hearing. Having ears, then, you learn how to hear, and having eyes, you learn how to see, instead of being like the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. So we have to seek to be where we think it is. Maybe we'll find out we're wrong. That is the truth, to absorb by osmosis. If we think we found out it's not there, we can move on. But be careful, we're not doing it as an excuse or an alibi to avoid retraining and transmuting our consciousness. You then are destined, really, to receive the consciousness of the Masters, not because it is theirs, but because the moment you reach that state of capacity, that is the vibrational level that you automatically start to express. And it's a law that is invariable. You are being grown towards that by your own higher soul being incidentally in definite contact with that hierarchy which has evolved to a state beyond the average that we have, so that it knows the laws of consciousness. You are destined to make it sooner or later. Naturally, no one knows where or how, nor is it a one thing, I've made it. Remember that. This graded hierarchy is there. And to the degree that you are happy, or teaching yourself, training yourself to be happy with the continuous drop, drop, drop of the water on the rock, with the holding your heart open to the impact of the higher knowing, being willing to let anything you think you've known go if there's a higher knowing, reaching with love, reaching with spirit to that which is beyond. And when you express at all times to learn how to keep the symbolism of the tarot keys with you, to help you more and more to express the ideas and the teachings and the messages. And by messages we don't mean the kind that we read about so often, because the highest messages do not have words. Remember this. Anyone who receives things in forms of words are not receiving the highest messages. The highest messages cannot be in words, because words, as we pointed out, the different reactions between people, if they would be called mystics or emotional or whatever in terms of traits. No, the teachings from the masters comes in symbol, and not only in symbol, but it comes in a way where the symbol is a correlate with a direct act of knowing. And correlated together, it's like really getting plugged in to a level of broadcast that fills us more and more, gives us more and more of the powers from that level, more and more of the controls, because we're getting the powers to help us, more and more then of the ability and the capacity to express it out, so that the more we learn to receive using our tarot symbols and the tree of life after that, the more we become able to project. And this really is the secret of being tuned to the masters without the various other elements of illusion and delusion which come to so many people who get their messages in so-called automatic writings and in or so-called inner voices and whatever ways. Knowledge of consciousness makes you realize that though it's interesting to get certain things that are psychic, you want more, and you're not accepting all of that. Part of it is one, part another. And this again is the reason for training your consciousness to hold on to these patterns that were given to us by those who've gone beyond us, so as to become a mutual receiving station for the projections that are going on. You have been receiving those projections this morning. You receive them every time you come here. You receive them because your minds and hearts are lifted, and we're working with the symbols, and because we're working with each other, and everything I say, I have the tarot images and the symbols in my mind, and we work that way together in a back and forth flow. That's why you have found that I answer practically every question you have in your mind. It's because we are tuned in together through the mutual reach to the symbol of the higher levels, not the lower levels. Work then. Don't ever let yourself get disheartened. Don't ever let yourself get twisted around. Be willing to keep plugging step by step with these symbols. Be willing to use them to retrain your whole consciousness and open your channels. And this earth that you walk on will be not an earth. You will realize it as being that which with you is hurtling through infinity. And the stars will not just be stars, they will be crowns. And everything you do will be something that is a miracle. And every breath you breathe will be the breath of God, because you're willing to take the step-by-step retraining to be able to reach the consciousness of the masters instead of hunting for it to no avail. God bless you.